Hello, it is mid-March 2024 and I'm in the Santa Rita Mountains for what's planned to be a 4-day backpacking trip. The Santa Ritas are a sky island range in southern Arizona. My route starts and ends along the Arizona Trail, and in the middle I'll be climbing up to the top of the Santa Rita Crest. The biggest challenge that I expect to face is that there is several feet of snow remaining up there, so we'll see what impact that has. It is a beautiful day for hiking today, and it's time to hit the trail. A clear view of the Santa Rita Crest, headlined by Mount Wrightson on the left. The Santa Ritas are full of interesting history. This sandbox was part of a water pipeline that served mining needs in the area. These rock walls along the trail are the remains of a 10-foot high, 100-foot long dam water storage that supplied the flow that went through the pipeline and that sandbox, stretching 8.5 miles. I'm breaking off the route of the current Arizona Trail to follow the route of the old Arizona Trail to take me deeper into the Santa Rita Mountains. Completed my walk along Upper Gardner Canyon Forest Service Road. I'm now continuing on the path of the old AZT via the Ditch Mountain Trail, heading towards Bear Spring. Since time immemorial, the native inhabitants have called these mountains Chew-da-og. Oral history indicates that tribal inhabitants, when leaving the area, especially for reasons of conflict, once they returned, they would often spend 4 days in Chew-da-og, performing purification rites before re-entering their life into their communities. So I feel very fortunate to be out here for 4 days of my own, exploring and drinking in the beauty of Chew-da-og. Another feature of the mining pipeline system, this tunnel carried water underground for 1,000 feet. A neat cliff structure across the gully. The trail has wrapped around to the backside of those interesting cliff faces, and it's funny, it looks like giants constructed big walls across the landscape. Officially entering the Mount Wrightson wilderness. Looking down Big Blanca Canyon, past the rolling Canelo Hills, out to the distant Huachuca Mountains, the Sky Island Range to the southeast, and the Whetstone Mountains, the Sky Island Range to the east. Good flowing water in the vicinity of Bear Spring. I'm going to look for camp right on the other side of this pretty creek. Home sweet home. A cozy campsite, sheltered from the sun and the wind, with an earshot of the running water. Can't ask for much more than that. Time to get set up.
The Santa Ritas, southeastern Arizona's fourth highest sky island range at 9,456 feet, tower more than a mile above the surrounding desert floor, rivaling the depths of the Grand Canyon.
tent is pitched. I harvested some water. Now I'm going to get comfortable for a bit of relaxing before dinner time. Day 1 has gotten my trip off to a great start. The hiking was smooth, the weather was cooperative, and the scenery was splendid. A bit of rain has moved in this evening, but it's not expected to last that long. I've got a big day of climbing tomorrow up to the top of the Santa Rita Crest, so I'll need to rest up tonight. Camp set up, I've got dinner in me, and that'll be the end of day 1. Good night. Good morning. Made it to day 2 of my backpacking trip in Arizona's Mount Wrightson wilderness. Calm night last night, temperature dropped down to about 37, comfortable. Got some good rest, which was needed because I've got a lot of climbing to do today to get up to the top of the Santa Rita Crest. I'll have in the range of 4,000 vertical feet to get up to. Hopefully the day stays pretty for me and the nice weather escorts me from here, the bottom of the range, all the way up to the top. I'm going to get camp packed up. It'll be time to hit the trail. A crystal blue day to start out. There's Mount Wrightson. A short distance up from my campsite, the official Bear Spring sign. Flat desert land separates the end of the Santa Ritas from the distant Whetstone Mountains. As I finish up the Ditch Mountain Trail and hop onto the Walker Basin Trail, I'm also finishing up my stretch along the old Arizona Trail route. Continuing to climb in elevation, the ecosystem adjusts as I get higher. It looks like this saddle fell prey to a fire at some point in the past. Straight ahead is the cliff face of Big Blanca Canyon. I've come quite a ways from yesterday. Wrightson looks closer, but it is still a lot of climbing to get there. My goal for the day is Baldy Saddle, just off the top of the mountain. Some white clouds building in the sky. They don't look to be causing any problems. Way out there is the Huachuca Mountains. Rising beyond the ridge is our first good look at the Patagonia Mountains, which lie to the south of the Santa Ritas. Completing my stretch of the Walker Basin Trail, now hopping onto the Gardner Canyon Trail. I'm only about 3 miles from Baldy Saddle, but I've still got a good 2,000 vertical feet to rise. Another Sky Island range has come into view. Over the far ridge to the northeast are the Rincon Mountains, which I explored last year in Saguaro National Park. Haven't seen much snow yet because we've mostly been looking at the southern side of the ridge, but Josephine Peak gives a preview of what I'll find as I continue to scale the side of Wrightson. First patch of snow along the trail. More to come. First snow traverse of the trip. If the snow stays hard, I'll be happy. If it gets soft and I start post-holing, it's going to be a tough finish to the day. As I transition from the Gardner Canyon Trail onto the Super Trail, the conditions are going to transition from mostly dry to mostly snow-covered. The Super Trail is super snowy, but I can see my destination, Baldy Saddle. Closing in. What's that big gray cloud doing? Hopefully just blowing by. Baldy Spring is completely snowbound. I'll be relying on the snow for water up here. I've happily emerged from the snow. Fortunately, it was hard. No post holing. You can see my footprints wrapping around the side of Wrightson. Baldy Saddle on an absolutely gorgeous day in the Santa Rita Mountains. I'm a hair below 9,000 feet. Mount Wrightson. Home sweet home. I made to camp on a little knoll above Baldy Saddle. Spectacular views up here. Get set up, try to get out of the wind. Happy to have made it through the snow and all that. Time to get set up and start resting for tomorrow. Another challenging day.
In November 1958, tragedy struck a group of Boy Scouts who had set out to scale Mount Wrightson on a day hike. An unexpected snowstorm whipped up, dumping 6 inches in Tucson, the city's second highest ever recorded snowfall, and several feet up in the mountains. It took over 700 volunteers more than 2 weeks to find the bodies of the 3 young lives lost on the side of the Santa Rita Mountains.
Camp set up. Beautiful sight up here on a beautiful day. Of course, Mount Wrightson. This campsite gives a great view of the Huachucas to the southeast and the Whetstones to the east. Far away to the south, past Wrightson, is Mexico. There is the Whipple Observatory. Looking out to the west, you really see why Sky Islands is an apt name for these mountain ranges. They rise right out of the ocean of desert to touch the sky. Day 2 has been another great day in Chu Da Og. I made it up the steep climb, made it through the snow, and the reward of Baldy Saddle was well worth it. It's got me excited for tomorrow because Baldy Saddle is just the start of the Santa Rita Crest, and in the morning I'll be walking along it for several miles. Camp set up, I've got dinner in me, and I'm enjoying this view. That'll be the end of day 2. Good night. Good morning. Made it to day 3, the penultimate day of my backpacking trip in Arizona's Coronado National Forest. Temperatures dropped a little bit below freezing last night. The moon was shining brilliantly, and so were the lights of Tucson out to the north. A scenic campsite like this obviously has some pros. You get the views. There are potential cons as well, and although I had a comfortable night last night, I was out in the Santa Ritas less than a week ago on a trip where everything went horribly wrong, culminating at this very campsite where I set up on a calm, beautiful afternoon just like yesterday, but after the sun set, things shifted. The winds became severe gale force, 50+ miles per hour. They ended up blowing my tent down, and I spent the night cowboy camping in sub-freezing temperatures, exposed to those 50+ miles per hour wind. As soon as first light hit, I was ready to head down the mountain, but by then snow had started. Visibility was down to about 100 feet. Fortunately, I was able to make it down and get out, but I bailed on the trip a day early, and it went so poorly for me that I had to come right back to the Santa Ritas to redo it. And I had a much better, more comfortable night up here last night. I'm gonna get camp packed up and it'll be time to hit the trail for a fun day on the crest. One final look around this beautiful campsite up at the top of Baldy Saddle. Thanks for the hospitality. It's looking like a clear day today. The sun is warming things up nicely. Looking back at the snowy side of Mount Wrightson. Just over the vegetation are the Rincons to the northeast. Dead ahead are the Whetstones to the east. There are the Huachucas to the southeast. We're seeing all our Sky Island friends up here. The Patagonias to the south. And of course, there's Wrightson. Awesome views from the Santa Rita Crest. Time for some fun in the snow. Really pretty pine forests up here at nearly 9,000 feet. The difference between a south-facing slope to the left and a north-facing slope to the right is drastic. There is so much snow still on that slope, but this one's dry. Deep, deep, deep snow. I'm glad I'm not post-holing through it. A nice little snow melt stream. I gathered some water to treat. Our first clear view of the Santa Catalina Mountains to the north of the Santa Ritas. Of course, just to the right of the Catalinas are the Rincons, and at the base of those ranges lies the city of Tucson. Coming to the end of the Crest Trail in Florida Saddle, I'm going to start dropping precipitously down the Sawmill Canyon Trail. In total, I'll be descending over 4,500 vertical feet today, and the bulk of that is coming up soon. Turns out the Sawmill Trail climbs for a good 500 feet before it starts dropping. A look back at the imposing and snowy Santa Rita Crest. That's what I traversed over. Just spooked that deer off a daybed. It maneuvers through this terrain so easily, I'm jealous. Our near omnipresent friends out to the east, the Whetstones. Keep in mind the vast distance between the Whetstones and the Santa Ritas for a story later on. A pair of old structures around this spring. Quite a bit of water flowing down from Sawmill Spring. The sawmill is looking pretty canyony through this stretch. Continued descent in elevation leads to continued shifts in the ecosystem. As I finish up the Sawmill Canyon Trail and join onto the Greaterville Trail, the bulk of my descent on the day is done. I should have less than 1,000 feet to descend over the latter half of my day, which means I've dropped over 3,500 already. Exiting the Mount Wrightson wilderness. It's treated me well the past couple days. A lot of adventure in there. The elevation at the beginning of the Greaterville Trail and the end of the Greaterville Trail were pretty similar, so I thought it'd be a kind of chill, flat hike. But it is not. It's going straight up and then, I assume, straight back down. What goes up must come down. Quite the tower array on that next hill over. Completed the very much not flat Greaterville Trail I'm now hopping onto Forest Road 165 for a little bit to then connect with the Arizona Trail for the rest of the day. The road has brought me right up to this weird array. I don't know what it is, but there's a loud noise coming from it. The snow of the Santa Rita Crest feels like a lifetime ago. It's hot down here. As I rejoin with the path of the Arizona Trail, I have unfortunately blown a tire. It's not having much of an impact so far, but if that whole bottom comes off, there will be an impact. There are so many interesting facets to the Santa Ritas. The native history, the settler and mining history, the obvious natural beauty. Another aspect that I think is super cool is the story of El Hefe, the jaguar. El Hefe rose to prominence because he was, for about a half decade, the only known wild jaguar in the United States. He came up from Mexico around the beginning of the 2010s and first made his home in the Whetstone Mountains until he then came from the Whetstones to the Santa Ritas and spent about 5 years, his exact arrival and departure dates are unknown, living in the Santa Ritas, trying to establish a new home range for the jaguars. He ended up returning to Mexico. They got him on camera there in 2021. The spots on the jaguar are similar to the fingerprints of a human. They're unique identifiers, so they're able to say, hey, El Hefe has come home. And you know, for El Hefe, he undertook an epic journey, you know, an adventure of at least 5 years, maybe 10, searching for a mate, searching for a new home range. And you know, perhaps in El Hefe's eyes, and perhaps in the eyes of his jaguar society, his epic adventure may be looked at as a failure, right? He didn't find a wife. He didn't establish a new home range. Maybe when he got back to his old friends, you know, they may have said, oh, Jefecito, no tienes una esposa, ja. But when we look at the impact that El Hefe's epic adventure had, he has almost single-handedly raised the profile for the potential re-expansion of jaguars into the United States. Since his sightings, there have been some steps forward to try to re-establish jaguars. One of those being the Santa Ritas, named as area essential to their re-establishment. And so even though El Hefe may not see it, even though his society may not see it, the impacts of his epic journey could continue to have such a big positive influence for the future of the jaguar species. And you know, I think there's a lesson that we can all take away from that. You know, maybe we go on our own epic adventures, or you know, we put a lot of work into something and perhaps we don't see the results that we expected, but you never know what impact you could have. And so, you know, I personally would take away from El Hefe, strive for greatness. Try to do something big. You know, maybe you go home with your tail tucked and you have to find a wife the old way, but the impact that he has on future generations of jaguars, re-establishing them in North America, cannot be understated. So big shout out to you, El Hefe. I hope you're doing well, and maybe your species will get back up here one day. Making my way towards Kentucky camp, where they have running water. So this is Kentucky camp. They've got water here, a pit toilet. There should be a place where I can set up camp. If you'll remember the water pipeline from day one, this is the headquarters of that mining operation. Home sweet home. So it says that Dispersed camping is allowed at Kentucky Camp outside the historical district boundary. Now that I'm here, there are no signs or map to indicate where that boundary lies. So I came outside that gate several hundred yards from any of the buildings, found this old fire pit, so I hope this is an okay place to set up. If not, friends of Kentucky Camp, I apologize.
The jaguar evokes images of the Amazon rainforest, but was originally native to North America before moving down to Central and South America. Their historic range spread across the Southwest from Louisiana to California, but jaguars were extirpated from the U.S. in the 1900s.
Camp's all set up. There's actually quite a lot to see here at Kentucky Camp. I wandered around for an hour or so, looking for the boundary markers, but also enjoying the history. The headquarters is pretty much like a museum inside. A lot of interesting stuff to learn here. Day 3 in Chew-Da-Og has been another great day. The mileage and all the descent conspired to make my feet pretty tired by the end of it, but there was lots of cool stuff to see along the way. The crest was an obvious highlight, but I also really enjoyed Sawmill Canyon. It had beautiful pine forest up top, and then the canyon tightened up a little bit in the lower stretches, so there's a cool mix of environments to hike through. Kentucky Camp has its own set of interesting historical tidbits to learn about, but for now, I've got camp set up, dinner in me, and I'm settling in for the final night of my trip. As long as nothing crazy happens, that'll be the end of day 3. Good night. Good morning. Made it to day 4 of my backpacking adventure in the Santa Rita Mountains. Comfortable and restful night last night. Stayed about 10 degrees warmer than the night before. I only have a short hike out today along the Arizona Trail, so it should be a pretty easy end to my trip. Before I get headed out, since my feet are feeling less tired than they were last night, we'll take a look around some of the historical artifacts at Kentucky Camp. Before that, I'll get camp packed up and there'll be time to hit the trail. This is one of the historical buildings at Kentucky Camp. I'm not sure exactly what this one is, but right now there's a bird trapped inside. I tried to find the caretaker last night and this morning. They're nowhere to be found. So once I get out, I'll try to call the hotline and see if someone can let this poor bird out. He's just been banging himself against the screen window since yesterday. At the far window is the bird. He's perched on the windowsill. Oh, there he just flew up. Poor guy. There he is. I'll try to get you out, buddy. Just hang on. Here are some old machinery and the remains of a foundation. This is a cabin that can be rented out via recreation.gov. Old headquarters building of the mining operation. Now it serves as kind of like a museum. There's some old furniture inside, some old photographs, some historical information. And out to the left is trash cans, a water source, and a pit toilet. Back behind the headquarters is the gold processing building. This giant nozzle would shoot water into the hillsides to wash away the dirt and the gold, which would then be captured in sluices, and that is what all the water from that pipeline that we saw would come to shoot into these nozzles and then be used to try to find the gold. Hopping back on the Arizona Trail, leaving Kentucky Camp. Good news, I was able to find the caretaker this morning, and he is in the process of freeing the bird. So the bird will be okay. He's going to be back into the wild within the next few minutes. The bird is free. A couple miles on the AZT to finish off my hike. I expect that the Arizona Trail will be pretty chill and mostly flat hiking the rest of the way. Hopefully this is not a repeat of the Greaterville trail situation, which ended up being the opposite of flat. But I did speak with the caretaker Steve this morning as we were working to free the bird, and he confirmed that I was set up in a correct area last night. He said anywhere outside the fence is good to go for dispersed camping. Well, hey there, Santa Ritas. There's actually a storm coming through tonight through tomorrow night that may dump up to 8 inches of snow in the upper reaches of the mountains. I got down just in time. Mount Wrightson, Baldy Saddle, the Santa Rita Crest, Sawmill Canyon, and then this ridge must have been what the Greaterville Trail went up and down. A sighting of that water pipeline that we've been hearing so much about. This is what they ran for, I guess, 8.5 miles through the mountains. There's the trailhead. It's gotten super windy all of a sudden. Woo. 4 days and chewed all done and dusted. This trip meant a lot to me because, as I mentioned, I was in the Santa Ritas just a couple days ago and I got knocked down hard. So it meant a lot to be able to come back to these beautiful mountains and do the 4-day route that I had originally planned. I love Arizona's Sky Island ranges. They're so unique, and for my next trip I'm going to be going up to the Galleros, another Sky Island range. Until then, thanks for tuning into Lane's World. Goodbye.